Do you see any similarities between where one buck's using an area when you're finding postseason that if you find something similar like that on that same piece of public, you're probably going to find another mature buck? Or do you find any kind of similarities?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Can we talk about some of those similarities? I'm just real curious.
Okay.
Okay. What are just the outlying factors? Like, what does it have to have in order for a mature buck to be using and to survive in order for him to get the age that you're looking for?
Usually there's going to be some sort of water source really, really close by. Uh, the majority of them is going to be in some sort of thicket, and you just don't see a lot of trees around it. There's going to be briars over your head. I mean, it's going to be stuff you can't even walk through. You'd think in your brain, like, man, there's not going to be any deer there. You can't even walk through it. But that's the type of environment that I figured out that they kind of really hone in on it, especially, public land, when they're being, pressured like they are. So you can go to just probably any public land in Alabama, and where you find the big bucks in the thickets, you go to the next WMA, they're going to be in the same type environment, same type thickets. So, yeah, I mean, there's a correlation with it for sure.
How do you like to scout and like maybe run trail cameras?
Yeah, usually especially if I'm planning on, ghillie hunting, I'm going to post-season, scout that area because I want to see what it's going to look like during the time that I'm going to be there. And it's usually around the rut. So I kind of want to see what that area is going to look like, the vegetation and stuff and the cover. But usually I'll find a cover, I'll target in on my main thing, rubs. I feel like I have a whole lot more success hunting around big rubs. I'm talking about chest high rubs. I want to see multiple rubs too, not just one or two where they're just moving through the area. I want to know that buck. That's his little core area that he's spending some time there, and so I target in on a couple of those areas. And I'll go in and try to hang some cameras. Postseason, watch the cameras, see what kind of movement I got. Base all of my hunting on that. And usually, the areas that I pick out like that are usually going to be good areas. I've been fortunate enough to have some good bucks come in, on camera. So, I always, are going to do some postseason scouting, to go ahead and try to figure out where I'm going to be hunting.
So you're saying postseason scouting, you like finding big rubs, and then how are you're implementing trail cameras at the end of the season, trying to, I guess, locate some of these bucks because, of course, they don't lose their antlers down here until a lot of times March, or if not sometimes April.
That's correct.
So you have plenty of time. By the time Alabama season goes out February 10th, you still have a month plus potentially of finding deer, finding bucks with their antlers still on their head, identifying them and figuring out, if you can hunt that area. Now, you're talking about big rubs. Now, let me ask you, because, again, you hunt a wide range of habitat. Are you paying attention to certain rubs in certain habitat areas mean more to you than others? As in, if you're in a big hardwood drainage, you find a couple big rubs down there, is that as valuable as if it's closer to cover in a different area? Like, how are you justifying where you're putting those cameras in order to locate some of these bucks?
The way I determine if I'm going to hunt it or not, I'll kind of get down on my hands and knees, like at a deer's level. And if it looks thick on my hands and knees, and that's to me as a deer would be looking at it, that's going to be an area that I would target. If it's not thick, I'm staying away from it.
And you're not going to put a camera there. You're trying to associate finding that big sign in and around that thicker cover.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where you're more than likely going to try to catch a picture. Now, when you do that, you're postseason scouting, you're really like focused on rubs. Scrapes aren't very important for you?
The only bad thing about scrapes, one of the areas I like to hunt, it's usually underwater, and the scrapes are pretty limited. So,
okay.
Now I put my cameras usually on a mock scrape on certain areas, but further down south, I don't focus on any of that. But really, even central, or down south, I'm going to focus more on rubs.
Okay.
My personal opinion, I have more success. If I'm talking big rubs. If I find big rubs, I'm usually going to be on a big deer.
Okay. So you're locating the big rubs, running trail cameras on those. Walk us through a little bit on once you are identifying that, hey, you get a really nice buck on camera, like whatever you're looking for when you're talking about like a mature buck, you get them on camera. How do you take that information in when it's 2, 3, 4 weeks after season and he's using an area versus where you may find him come that following season? Is he more than likely? Do you feel like he's going to be in that general area, or is it more trying to relocate him? Sometime early bow season.
Well, also too during when I'm out here scouting around, finding my areas that I'm going to hunt, finding the rubs. I really, really want to find some sheds. If I find some good sheds, I mean, that's where that buck, that's his home. So, you're not going to have to set up too far off that. But, y'all know as well as I do how hard it is in Alabama to find some sheds. You find a shed, you're on the deer right there. So,
I want to ask as well, what do you consider thick? So if you're getting down on your hands and knees and you're looking through cover, I mean, are you looking for something that's like dog hair thick, or just you can't see more than 15, 20 yards?
Yeah, no more 15, 20 yards.
Okay.
It can be switchgrass. It don't even have to be any kind of certain vegetation. I've seen more buck movement in the tall switchgrass and the cutovers than probably I have anywhere, But it's just getting to them. That's the problem, So it don't, like I said, it don't have to be any type of certain vegetation. I really want to key in on, if it's a thick area that's got a lot of rubs in it, but I want it to have also, like the greenbrier, something for them to be able to stay around that area to eat where they don't have to get up out of it and move. I mean, I think, a lot of people in Alabama, they'll go to a WMA and they're like, man, there's no deer there. They're just not hunting the right spot, but they're there. You just can't see them. It's so thick, I mean, some of the places that, that's holding up the big deer, some of them you just can't get to, I don't care what you do, what kind of hunter you are, you can't get to them unless you got a helicopter. So
That's exactly, I was about to bring that. You need a helicopter.
Yes. Yes. And a bush hog.
Yeah, for real.
Do
you ever walk the edge of those really, really thick areas and look for like a tunnel or just a trail coming out of that thing?
Oh,
and
yeah.
You put cameras on that?
Oh, yeah.
That? Okay.
Yeah.
What's that process like for you? I mean, is that just like a jackpot money thing or what?
And what sign do you have to see associated with it? Like, do you have to see that tunnel with the big rub, or if you just find that big tunnel is being used?
A lot of times I find the big tunnel. I try to walk through it if I can, but usually, it just depends on where it's at. Usually you get about halfway through it, you have to turn around. But if I walk into the tunnel, one of the main things I want to look for in those type areas like that is droppings. And you'll know if the deer is going to be there in those thickets like that, because there will be droppings everywhere, which I'm sure y'all know too. So it would there's so many in these pine thickets and cutovers in Alabama. If you got out in the middle of one of them and looked around, there are trails. I'm talking everywhere, hundreds of trails. So unless you find like some big rubs, like there's some saplings that's been rubbed or whatever, I mean, personally, it's really hard to pin that down, which trail to sit up on. So now if you could get up above it, look down in it, and you kind of know an area where a big buck's been hanging out, of course, yeah.
Now, there was a place we hunted last year in Alabama that it's got mixed timber on it, and we were walking through some open timber. We were actually hunting with the dogs and woodcock hunting, and we hit we were working through some fairly open timber, open hardwoods, and we hit a logging road system that was just thick. Had privet on it, like small pines growing up on it. It was just like it was a wall. In that logging road, it must have been like an old road intersection where a couple different roads split off. And there's no deer sign in the open hardwoods. And the second you got into that, it was just, intersections of trails and rubs and scrapes all come together in one spot. And that was one of those areas I was like, to hunt this, you almost would have to sit on the ground, because like if you got up in a tree, that deer could be 7, 8, 10 yards from you, and you can't see down through it. But when you get on the ground, you could see underneath some of that stuff. I mean, it's thick, but like it's more like visual obstruction. Like, you know, anything, if you were up elevated looking down into that area where all these intersections came through, like you wouldn't have been able to see a deer very well. But if you got on the ground, you could. And just the amount of sign, and the second you got back out of that, you cross through it, you know, go 20 yards, you come through the other side, there's nothing, no sign.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, that was one of those areas, now thinking about it, where it's like all this deer sign's pinching down to this one spot where they're all coming from these different areas, and they're coming to this one spot, and there's like 2 or 3 big scrapes there, a couple really big rubs that now looking back at probably would have been a spot you probably could have sat on the ground and probably done some calling and had some success maybe in a location like that.
Man, I would even bring a camera in there and try to, you know, put it on one of those little bitty trees. You know, if you could just get in there to it. But I'm not opposed to walking through an area like that. You know, at the end of the season, and you know, if I jump a buck out of it, you know, I know where to come set up next year. Because you know, you jump a big buck out of an area, you know, that's going to be probably his area where he's going to be the next season. You know, from my experience. But